Welcome, dear listener, to a time long before the written word, to the quiet, rhythmic dawn of human existence. Close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath in, and let it out peacefully into the stillness of the night. Tonight, we journey back to the Stone Age. Not a time of chaos, but a deeply grounded era of patience, careful observation, and profound connection to the earth. Let the flickering warmth of the ancient hearth fire guide your resting mind into absolute peace. The creation of a stone tool begins not with raw force, but with a deep, careful understanding of the earth's hidden materials. An early craftsman sits cross-legged beside a quiet running stream, turning a rounded nodule of gray flint over and over in their calloused hands, reading the subtle ridges and natural fault lines of the stone. With a carefully chosen antler hammer, they strike the very edge of the flint with a precise, glancing blow, sending a perfectly shaped, razor-thin flake tumbling softly into the grass. Below, this rhythmic tapping, the sharp, satisfying clink of antler against stone, echoes peacefully through the ancient valley. The toolmaker repeats this deliberate process, systematically removing thin, curved layers, slowly revealing the elegant teardrop shape of a hand axe hiding within the raw core. The edge is then meticulously refined, using a smaller bone pressure flaker, pressing tiny, jagged chips away to create a sharp, serrated surface. This single, perfectly balanced tool represents generations of accumulated geological knowledge, transforming a simple river stone into an essential, life-giving instrument. The ancient art of kindling a fire relies entirely on the steady rhythmical application of friction and immense physical patience. A hearthkeeper selects a dry, straight spindle of soft willow wood, resting its spot, rounded tip into a small indentation carved into a harder cedar baseboard. A handful of finely shredded birch bark and dried moss, gathered earlier that afternoon, is placed gently around the spinning point. With a steady downward pressure, they begin to roll the spindle rapidly between their open palms, creating a soft, continuous humming sound that blends with the ambient rustling of the forest canopy. Slowly, a tiny wisp of pale, fragrant smoke begins to rise from the darkening wood dust, gathering at the base. The motion continues, smooth and unbroken, until a glowing red ember forms in it, the blackened groove. The ember is carefully transferred into a nest of dry tinder, held gently in a cupped hands and breathed upon with long, measured exhalations, coaxing the quiet spark into a warm, life-sustaining yellow flame. The preparation of earth pigments is a methodical, deeply sensory practice that transforms the raw mineral landscape into enduring visual expression. A gatherer returns to the rock shelter with heavy fist-sized lumps of iron-rich hematite, known as red ochre, displaying deep hues of terracotta and rust. These rough stones are placed into a shallow, smooth depression within a large granite boulder, serving as a natural mortar. Using a rounded river cobble, the artisan begins to grind the hematite with slow, circular motions, a steady, scraping rhythm that gradually crushes the hard mineral into a remarkably fine, vividly colored powder. To bind the dry dust into a usable paint, they carefully mix in a few drops of clear spring water or sometimes warm animal fat, stirring the paste with a small, carved wooden spatula. The resulting mixture is thick, smooth, and deeply saturated, ready to be applied to the cool limestone walls of the cave, preserving the maker's vibrant connection to the earth. For thousands of years, the invention of strong, flexible cordage represents a quiet revolution in early human engineering, created entirely by the patient twisting of simple plant fibers. During the warm, late summer months, gatherers harvest tall, fibrous stalks of stinging nettle and dogbane, peeling away the tough outer bark to reveal the long, silky inner threads. These damp green fibers are laid out in the warm sun to dry, then gently pounded with a smooth wooden mallet to separate the individual strands without snapping them. An artisan takes 2 thin bundles of this prepared fiber, pinching them tightly between their thumb and forefinger. By rolling the strands downward across their thigh, and then twisting them back together in the opposite direction, they create a tightly bound, interlocking cord that is incredibly resilient. This methodical, repetitive motion induces a state of deep, peaceful focus, slowly extending the thin rope, inch by inch, creating an essential material used for weaving baskets, securing stone tools, and tying the supporting frames of temporary shelters. Oh, nastu nente nauseyo diganti, kanagdisto to kadadaptati. The seasonal harvest of wild acorns provides a vital, starchy food source, though preparing them requires a multi-step process to remove their naturally bitter tannins. Foragers carry heavy, woven baskets into the quiet oak groves, collecting thousands of the smooth brown nuts scattered across the forest floor. Back at the camp, the acorns are carefully cracked open using small hammerstones, releasing the pale, nutritious kernels hidden safely inside. These raw kernels are then placed into deep wooden mortars and rhythmically pounded into a coarse, golden flour, a process that fills the air with a rich, comforting nutty aroma. Because the raw flour is highly astringent, it is scooped into a shallow basin, formed out of clean, washed river sand. Cool, fresh water is repeatedly poured over the flour, slowly dissolving and draining the bitter tannins away into the earth below. Once fully leached and dried, this processed meal is gently kneaded with water and baked on flat, sun-warmed stones, producing dense, nourishing flatbreads to sustain the entire community. Transforming a stiff, raw animal hide into a soft, flexible garment is a deeply laborious task that requires physical endurance and specialized ancestral knowledge. After carefully scraping away the inner membranes with a sharp, chipped flint side scraper, the heavy skin is stretched taut across a sturdy wooden frame, drying slowly in the cool, circulating breeze. To prevent the material from hardening into an unusable shell, workers rub a rich, conditioning mixture of animal brains and warm water deep into the porous fibers of the hide. The damp skin is then pulled repeatedly back and forth across a smooth, tautly secured sinew rope, a rhythmic, stretching motion that physically breaks down the dense collagen bonds within the leather. Finally, the hide is suspended over a shallow, smoldering fire pit. Damp, decaying oak wood. The thick, white smoke permeates the softened material, permanently sealing the fibers against moisture and leaving the finished leather with a rich, golden brown hue and a deeply comforting, earthy scent. The crafting of a delicate bone needle is a masterpiece of prehistoric microengineering, allowing early humans to sew intricate, tightly fitted clothing to survive the encroaching cold. An artisan selects a dense, straight sliver of bone, usually taken from the leg of a large grazing herbivore, and begins the slow process of shaping it. Using a piece of coarse sandstone, they rhythmically abrade the bone, grinding it it down for hours until it forms a smooth, remarkably slender cylinder with a sharp, tapered point. The most difficult step requires drilling a microscopic eye at the base of the needle, a task accomplished using a tiny, sharply pointed piece of flint known as a burin. By rapidly spinning the flint tip back and forth against the bone, they carefully hollow out a tiny circular hole just wide enough to thread a fine strand of dried sinew through. This exquisite tiny tool, polished smooth by the oils of the maker's hands, represents a profound leap in human technological precision. The creation of a hand stencil on a subterranean cave wall is a profoundly intimate, quiet act of leaving a permanent human signature in the deep darkness, guided only by the soft, flickering orange glow of a shallow animal fat lamp. An early artist ventures deep into the limestone caverns, far from the sounds of the surface world. They place their open, trembling left hand flat against the cold, damp, undulating surface of the stone. In their other hand, they hold a hollowed-out section of a bird bone, carefully filled with a finely ground, liquid mixture of red ochre and natural saliva. With a deep, powerful exhalation, they blow forcefully through the bone tube, spraying a fine, misty aerosol of crimson pigment directly over the back of their resting hand. When the hand is slowly peeled away from the rock, a perfect, pale silhouette remains, outlined in a vibrant, speckled halo of deep red, establishing a silent, enduring connection across thousands of years of human history. The production of birch bark pitch demonstrates a remarkable early mastery of chemical transformation, converting solid tree bark into a highly durable, waterproof adhesive. Gatherers strip large, papery sheets of white bark from fallen birch trees, folding the material tightly and placing it into a small, narrow pit dug into the clay-rich earth. The bark is completely covered with a layer of damp soil, restricting the flow of oxygen, while a hot, steady wood fire is built directly on top of the mound. As the intense heat slowly penetrates the buried chamber over several hours, triggers a process of destructive distillation, causing the natural resins within the bark to melt and pool at the bottom of the pit. Once the fire dies down and the earth cools, the ancient chemists carefully unearth a thick, black, incredibly sticky tar. When reheated, this precious pitch softens, allowing toolmakers to permanently glue sharp flint arrowheads into straight wooden shafts, creating composite tools of unparalleled strength. Constructing a semi-permanent winter shelter is a deeply cooperative, methodical endeavor, utilizing the natural geometry of the surrounding woodland resources. A small community begins by gathering dozens of thick, sturdy mammoth bones or heavy pine branches, interlocking them at the top to form a wide, stable, dome-shaped framework. This skeletal structure is then meticulously interwoven with hundreds of smaller, flexible hazel saplings, creating a tight, basket-like lattice that completely encloses the circular living space. To insulate the interior against the creeping frost, workers pile thick layers of dry golden steppe grass and green pine boughs over the wooden ribs, packing the vegetation down firmly to block the freezing winds. Finally, heavy animal hides are draped over the outermost layer, weighted down at the base with large, rounded river stones to prevent shifting. Inside, a shallow, stone-lined hearth is dug directly in the center, ensuring that the warm, glowing heat radiates evenly throughout the cozy, well-protected, and deeply peaceful home. The meticulous weaving of a sturdy gathering basket begins with the careful selection of young, flexible willow shoots. Gatherers walk quietly along the soft, damp riverbanks in the early spring, snapping off the straightest, greenest stems before they can harden into rigid wood. Returning to the hearth, the weaver strips the bitter bark away using a sharp flint flake, leaving behind smooth, pliable rods of pale sapling. The process starts at the very bottom, crossing thicker, older rods in a stalk pattern to form a solid, unyielding base. Taking a thinner, wet shoot, the artisan begins to weave over and under the base, rods in a continuous hypnotic spiral. As the basket slowly takes shape, the weaver's fingers move with a rhythmic, practiced muscle memory, pulling the horizontal weavers tight against the vertical stakes. This methodical interlocking creates a surprisingly rigid, incredibly lightweight container, perfectly engineered to hold the heavy, gathered weight of summer berries, wild roots, and freshly knapped flint without breaking. Preserving the vital nutrients of a successful autumn harvest requires a deep understanding of airflow, temperature, and wood chemistry. To ensure their food lasts through the frozen months, the community constructs a specialized smoking rack from green, unpeeled saplings, lashing the branches tightly together with damp rawhide. Thin, carefully sliced strips of lean muscle are draped evenly across the highest wooden rungs, spaced perfectly to allow the smoke to circulate. Below, the hearth keeper builds a small, smoldering fire using damp hickory ori, sweet-smelling applewood, deliberately avoiding flames that would cook and ruin the meat. The thick, rolling white smoke rises slowly through the rack, heavily coating the strips in natural, antimicrobial phenols and drying the flesh from the cut. Outside in hungry hell. This slow, patient process draws out all the moisture over several days, slowly transforming the highly perishable muscle into dense, dark, leathery strips of a jerky. These deeply smoked provisions will remain safe and incredibly nourishing for months, carefully stored away in woven grass bundles. Carving a musical instrument from the hollow bone of a large vulture is a delicate, profoundly focused task requiring immense precision. The bone worker begins by cutting away the knobby, articulated joints at both ends using a heavily serrated flint blade, a slow sawing motion that eventually leaves a clean, straight cylinder. To hollow out the center completely, they use a long, sturdy reed, pushing out the remaining marrow and soft tissue until the interior is perfectly smooth and resonant. The most crucial step is the placement of the finger holes, calculated through a deep, intuitive understanding of acoustic spacing. Using a sharply pointed flint awl, the maker slowly drills 3 or 4 small, precise circular openings along the top ridge of the bone, twisting the stone back and forth for hours. When finally brought to the lips, the breath flows smoothly over the carved notch, producing a haunting, breathy, and beautifully clear tone that echoes harmoniously against the vast limestone walls of the shelter. The creation of a multi-purpose, waterproof adhesive relies on the slow, careful extraction of sticky sap from mature, towering pine trees. A gatherer uses a heavy wedge-shaped stone chisel to make deliberate, shallow, V-shaped cuts into the rough bark, returning days later to collect the thick, golden tears of hardened resin that have bled from the wood. Nandi was so distant. Back at the camp, this brittle, crystallized sap is placed gently into a shallow, concave stone and positioned near the glowing red-hot embers of the hearth. As the gentle heat slowly permeates the stone basin, the rigid resin melts down into a bubbling, fragrant amber liquid. To prevent the glue from shattering like glass when it finally cools and sets, the artisan carefully stirs in a handful of finely crushed charcoal and dried rabbit droppings. This essential fibrous additive acts as a binding agent, creating an incredibly tough, resilient epoxy used to permanently secure sharp stone spearheads to their long wooden throwing shafts. Weaving a functional fishing net from wild plant fibers is an act of incredible patience, transforming hundreds of feet of delicate cordage into a strong, interlocking trap. The net maker sits quietly near the water's edge, holding a smooth, flat wooden gauge to ensure every single mesh square remains exactly the same size. Using a carved bone netting needle wrapped heavily with thin twined dogbane string, they loop the cord over the wooden gauge and pull it tightly through the previous row. With a quick, practiced twist of the wrist, they tie a firm, non-slipping sheet. Bend knot, pulling the fibers taut with a soft, satisfying snap. This repetitive, rhythmic tying continues for days, row after row, slowly expanding the fabric into a wide, flexible grid. To finish the trap, heavy, grooved limestone sinkers are firmly bound to the bottom edge, while buoyant, carved sections of thick pine bark are tied to the top, ensuring the net hangs perfectly vertical in the gentle flowing currents of the river. The collection and preservation of medicinal flora is a quiet, highly specialized practice guided by generations of accumulated botanical wisdom. A healer walks slowly through the dew-covered meadows at first light, searching Conidanta specifically for the broad green leaves of wild plantain and the delicate, feathery tops of yarrow. These plants must be gently pinched off at the stem with clean fingernails, carefully avoiding the roots to ensure the patch will regrow the following season. Returning to the dry, airy overhang of the rock shelter, the forager gathers the fresh stems into small, loose bundles, tying them securely at the base with a thin strand of dried grass. These fragrant bouquets are hung upside down from the wooden rafters of the shelter, positioned precisely where the warm circulating afternoon breeze can dry them without the damaging effects of direct sunlight. As the weeks pass, the leaves slowly curl and turn a deep, brittle green, preserving their powerful astringent and clotting properties for the cold, challenging months ahead. Refining raw, heavy earth into pliable, workable clay requires an exhausting, deeply physical process of purification and rhythmic kneading. A gatherer hauls heavy, woven baskets of wet, gray mud from the slippery, steep banks of a slow-moving river, spreading the dense material out onto large, flat slabs of sun-baked slate. To remove the sharp pebbles, twigs, and decaying organic matter that would cause the clay to explode in the fire, they meticulously pick through the mud with their fingertips. Once purified, the maker must add a temper, usually finely crushed seashells or ground limestone, aggressively folding it into the wet earth. This crucial addition provides structural strength, preventing the final vessel from shrinking and cracking as the internal moisture evaporates. The artisan then kneads the mixture relentlessly with the heavy heels of their hakati, hands pressing, folding, and rolling the clay for hours, driving out every single trapped air bubble until the material becomes perfectly smooth, uniformly dense, and ready to be coiled into a cooking pot. Carving a deep, symmetrical wooden bowl without the use of metal blades relies entirely on the slow, controlled application of smoldering fire. An artisan selects a large, dry half-log of fallen hardwood, usually maple or oak, resting it securely on the flat, packed earth. Taking a deeply glowing red-hot ember from the central hearth using 2 green sticks, they place it carefully onto the flat, upward-facing surface of the fire wood. By blowing continuously and methodically through a hollow river reed, the carver directs a precise, concentrated flow of oxygen directly onto the coal, causing the wood beneath to slowly char and burn away. As a shallow, blackened depression begins to form, they scrape away the loose, carbonized charcoal using a tough, serrated clamshell, revealing the fresh, unburnt wood underneath. This patient cycle of burning and scraping is repeated for hours, slowly sinking deeper into the log until a perfectly rounded, beautifully hollowed-out wooden vessel emerges from the solid, unforgiving block of ancient timber. The crafting of a reliable stone oil lamp brings essential, warm illumination to the deepest, most isolated chambers of the underground world. The process begins with the careful selection of a soft, porous piece of all limestone or statite, chosen for its natural ability to withstand intense, localized heat without shattering. Using a much harder, sharply pointed piece of quartzite, the artisan methodically pecks at the center of the soft stone, striking it hundreds of times to slowly carve out a shallow, smooth, saucer-like depression. Once the bowl is shaped, they render a heavy piece of animal fat, usually from a reindeer or mammoth, gently melting the suet over the fire until it transforms into a clear, liquid tallow. This rich fuel is poured into the carved stone reservoir, and a small, twisted wick made of dried Arctic moss or juniper bark is placed carefully at the edge. When lit, the moss absorbs the liquid fat, producing a steady, smokeless, and beautifully warm orange glow that pushes back the darkness. Constructing durable, insulated footwear requires a precise combination of heavy leather crafting and deep anatomical understanding of the human foot. A maker selects a thick, tough piece of heavily smoked bison hide for the sole, placing their bare foot firmly upon it to trace the exact natural shape of their resting heel and toes. Using an incredibly sharp, pressure-flaked obsidian blade, they slice cleanly through the dense leather, creating a perfectly customized foundation. The upper portion of the shoe is cut from a much softer, highly flexible piece of buckskin, designed to wrap comfortably around the ankle without restricting movement. To bind the pieces together, the artisan uses a thin bone awl to punch a series of evenly spaced, perfectly aligned holes around the perimeter of both hides. They then thread a long, damp strand of animal sinew through the holes, pulling the heavy stitches incredibly tight. As the wet sinew slowly dries, it naturally shrinks and hardens, clamping thick leather seams together in an unbreakable, watertight seal. The intricate carving of a tiny curved fishhook from a solid piece of deer antler represents a profound understanding of aquatic environments. An artisan begins by selecting a thick, dense section of the antler, using a heavy flint saw to deeply score the tough material. With rhythmic, patient back-and-forth motions, they cut a small, flat rectangle, which is then heavily abraded against a wet piece of coarse sandstone. Using a sharply pointed stone buran, they meticulously hollow out the center of the rectangle, slowly transforming the solid piece into a delicate U-shaped hook. The most challenging step involves carving a tiny backward-facing barb near the sharpened tip, requiring incredibly steady, precise hand movements to ensure the delicate point does not snap under pressure. Finally, a small groove is etched around the flat upper shank, providing a secure anchor point where a fine twisted line of nettle fiber can be tightly bound. This tiny, brilliantly engineered tool allows foragers to silently harvest the rich, deep water fish hiding within the slow-moving rivers, ensuring a steady, reliable food source. Creating a thick, insulating sleeping mat involves a deeply methodical process of gathering and tightly interlacing wild marsh grasses. In the late summer, foragers wade carefully into the shallow, muddy wetlands to harvest tall, flexible cattail stalks, cutting them precisely at the waterline. With a serrated flint knife, these long green ribbons are carried back to the camp and laid flat in the warm sun, allowing them to dry slowly until they turn a pale golden brown. To begin weaving, the artisan stakes a row of tightly twined hemp cords into the earth, creating a firm, unmoving vertical warp. Taking handfuls of the dried cattail leaves, they weave the thick plant material horizontally across the cords, passing over and under in a continuous rhythmic pattern. Every few inches, they use a smooth, heavy wooden batten to firmly pack the woven rows downward, compressing the grasses into a dense, solid fabric. The finished mat provides a crucial, soft barrier against the cold, damp earth, retaining essential body heat during the long, freezing winter nights. The ingenuity of early hydration relies on transforming organic membranes into lightweight, incredibly durable water carriers. Following this successful community harvest, a large, flexible stomach organ is carefully separated and thoroughly washed in a cold, fast-running stream. The thick, muscular lining is meticulously scraped clean, using a smooth, rounded clamshell, removing all perishable tissues without accidentally puncturing the delicate, watertight membrane. To cure and strengthen the pouch, it is inflated with air through a hollow reed, tied off with a strip of sinew, and hung high within the smoky rafters of the rock shelter. The continuous exposure to oak smoke naturally preserves the tissue, sealing their microscopic pores and turning the pale organ into a tough, semi-translucent leather flask. Before its first use, the interior is rinsed with a mixture of water and crushed charcoal, which neutralizes any lingering odors. Fitted with a carved wooden plug and a sturdy woven shoulder strap, Essential Vessel allows nomadic groups to venture far away from permanent rivers, carrying precious hydration into the arid, sun-baked plains. The ancient practice of harvesting wild honey requires an intricate knowledge of insect behavior and the calming, transformative properties of smoke. A gatherer locates a hollowed, ancient oak tree, humming with the vibrating energy of a thriving golden hive. Rather than approaching with force, they carefully construct a small, tightly bound bundle of damp green moss and dried pine needles. Igniting the very tip of this smudge stick, they blow gently upon the glowing embers, producing a thick, cool, and fragrant white smoke. By slowly waving this dense plume near the narrow entrance of the hive, the gatherer artificially mimics the scent of a forest fire, prompting the colony to peacefully retreat deep into the wooden cavity and gorge heavily on their reserves. With the insects pacified and sluggish, the gatherer carefully reaches a bit arm into the hollow, cleanly slicing away a single heavy section of waxy hexagonal calm. This incredibly energy-dense food, dripping with thick golden syrup, provides a vital, immediate source of raw carbohydrates to fuel the demanding physical labor of prehistoric survival. Transforming raw hides into durable leather without the use of animal brains relies instead on a deeply chemical, highly alkaline mixture of wood ash and water. An artisan gathers buckets of fine white calcified ash from the very bottom of the central cooking hearth, mixing it thoroughly with clean spring water in a hollowed wooden trough. The heavy, scraped animal hide is completely submerged in this gray, soapy liquid, allowing the caustic lye to slowly break down the tough, binding mucosa within the dermal layers over several days. Once the hair slips easily from the skin, the hide is washed, stretched tightly over a sloping log, and scraped vigorously with a smooth, heavy rib bone to push out all the remaining moisture. As the damp leather begins to dry, it is continuously pulled, stretched, and aggressively worked over a taut rope, physically preventing the collagen fibers from locking together. The final, crucial step is a deep, heavy smoking over a smoldering fire of green willow wood, completely waterproofing the material and leaving it impossibly soft. The invention of the bow drill is a masterpiece of mechanical leverage, multiplying human strength to effortlessly bore holes through dense wood and bone. A craftsman selects a naturally curved branch of flexible yew wood, tying a taut string of twisted animal sinew from one end to the other to form a simple bow. A perfectly straight, thin wooden spindle is then selected, and the sinew string is looped securely around its center. The artisan places the sharp, hardened tip of the spindle onto a flat piece of timber, capping the top end with a smooth, hollowed-out stone-bearing block that rests comfortably in the palm of their hand. By rhythmically pushing and pulling the wooden bow back and forth, the looped string forces the spindle to rotate at an incredibly high, sustained velocity. This rapid, continuous friction easily grinds away the material beneath it, sending up a tiny, fragrant curl of smoke as the wooden drill cleanly and precisely hollows out a perfect circular opening, essential for joining large structural beams without the need for binding. The seasonal foraging of wild, subterranean tubers requires specialized digging tools and a patient, multi-step cooking process to neutralize toxic plant defenses. Gatherers walk slowly through the damp autumn forests, carrying long, sturdy digging sticks made from hardened ash wood, their tips heavily charred in the fire to prevent splintering. When a patch of wild yams is located, they push the sharpened sticks deep into the soft, loamy earth, using body weight to pry the heavy, starch-rich roots to the surface. Because these raw tubers contain complex, indigestible starches and bitter alkaloids, they cannot be eaten raw. Back at the camp, a deep pit is dug and lined with smooth river stones that have been heated until they glow red. The wash tubers are laid over the hot stones, covered with thick layers of wet ferns, and sealed tightly beneath a mound of damp earth. This subterranean oven slowly steams the tough roots for hours, rendering them soft, sweet, and deeply nourishing for the long winter. The engineering of the atlatl, or spear thrower, perfectly utilizes the mechanical physics of leverage to dramatically increase the hunting range of a human arm. A toolmaker carefully selects a piece of strong, lightweight wood, typically a straight branch of hickory or ash, carving it down to a flat, slender board, roughly the length of their own forearm. At the very back of this wooden shaft, they carve a small, upward-facing hook. meticulously shaped to perfectly engage with a small, hollow depression drilled into the back end of a long, feathered dart. When preparing to launch, the hunter holds the flat handle of the atlatl, pinching the resting spear between their fingers. During the throwing motion, the atlatl acts as an artificial, extended joint, forcefully propelling the flexible dart forward with an immense transfer kinetic energy. This brilliant, quiet invention allows early humans to accurately strike targets from incredible, safe distances, drastically improving the efficiency of the hunt without requiring the intense, close-quarters physical exertion of a traditional thrusting spear. The systematic rendering of animal fat is a vital, multi-purpose process that guarantees no part of a harvested resource is ever wasted. Following a community hunt, large slabs of dense white suet are carefully sliced away from the heavy muscle tissue using exceptionally sharp, pressure-flaked flint knives. These chunks of raw fat are cut into uniform, bite-sized cubes and dropped into a thick, watertight leather boiling bag. The hearthkeeper uses 2 long wooden tongs to carefully lift glowing, red-hot river stones from the central fire, dropping them directly into the bag of fat. The intense, immediate heat causes the liquid to boil violently, slowly melting the solid suet down into a rich, clear, and highly nutritious liquid tallow. As the hot stones cool, they are continuously swapped out for fresh ones, ensuring a steady, rolling boil. Once fully rendered, the liquid fat is carefully poured into carved wooden bowls to solidify, providing an essential high-calorie food staple, a deeply protective waterproofing wax for leather, and a steady, long-lasting fuel source for stone lamps. The meticulous creation of a heavy bone awl is absolutely essential for the construction of warm, fitted clothing and the repair of thick leather shelters. An artisan begins by scavenging the long, incredibly dense leg bone of a large herbivore, smashing the heavy joint with a heavy granite hammerstone to intentionally fracture the shaft. They carefully sift through the sharp, shattered fragments, selecting a single, sturdy splinter that naturally tapers toward one end. Gripping the wide base of the bone, they rhythmically grind the sharp point against a large, flat slab of wet, abrasive sandstone. The artisan pushes the bone back and forth, slowly rounding the jagged edges and honing the tip into an incredibly fine, perfectly smooth needlepoint. This simple, unadorned tool is continuously polished by the natural, oily friction of the maker's hands, growing smoother and more efficient with each passing generation. Pressed firmly against a heavy piece of cured hide, the awl silently and effortlessly parts the tough leather fibers, paving the way for tight, wind-proof sinew stitches. The aerodynamic perfection of a hunting dart relies on the meticulous attachment of wild bird feathers. An artisan sits quietly beside the glowing hearth, selecting 3 long, stiff, flight feathers dropped by a passing goose. Using a razor-sharp obsidian flake, they carefully split the central quill of each feather right down the middle, scraping away the excess pith to create a perfectly flat surface. These prepared feathers are placed evenly around the very back of a straight, polished ash wood shaft. To secure them, the maker uses impossibly fine threads of dried deer's sinew that have been chewed softly until they are completely pliable. They wrap the wet sinew tightly over the ends of the quills in a continuous, overlapping spiral. As the sinew slowly dries in the ambient heat of the fire, it naturally shrinks, clamping the delicate feathers to the wood with incredible, unbreakable tension. A tiny dab of warm melted pine pitch is painted over the bindings to waterproof the thread, creating a perfectly balanced, silent projectile. The seasonal harvest of rich, oily pine nuts provides a massive influx of essential calorie-dense fats, but extracting them requires careful thermal processing. Gatherers carry tightly woven baskets up into the high, rocky ridges, collecting hundreds of heavy sap-covered green cones before they naturally open and release their seeds. Back at the settlement, a shallow trench is dug into the earth and lined with glowing gray coals from the central fire. The tightly closed green cones are laid directly onto the hot ashes and turned continuously with long wooden tongs. As the intense heat penetrates the woody scales, the thick, sticky resins begin to boil and evaporate, filling the air with a remarkably sweet, heavy scent of pine. Slowly, with a series of quiet, satisfying puffs, the hard scales warp and peel backward, revealing the plump, dark brown seeds hidden deeply inside. The roasted cones are gently tapped against a flat granite boulder, allowing the warm, highly nutritious nuts to effortlessly cascade down into a waiting collection bowl. Transforming a simple sapling into a highly durable digging implement involves a deliberate, controlled application of destructive heat. A forager selects a straight, heavy branch of green yew wood, stripping away the outer bark to reveal the dense, pale grain beneath. Using a heavy flint hand axe, they roughly chop the thicker end into a gradual, blunt point to lock the cellular structure and prevent the wood from splintering against hard earth. The artisan thrusts the carved tip directly into a bed of deep, smoldering red embers. They rotate the heavy stick constantly, never allowing the wood to catch fire or burn completely through. As the moisture is forcefully driven out of the fibers by the intense heat, the surface of the wood deeply chars, hardening into an incredibly dense, blackened crust. This slow, deliberate roasting process artificially ages the green wood, yielding a robust, fire-hardened tool, perfectly engineered for prying up heavy stones, unearthing deep, starchy tubers, and breaking through the frozen winter soil. Maintaining physical cleanliness and processing tough fibers often relies on the remarkable chemical properties of the wild yucca plant. A gatherer uses a fire-hardened wooden stick to deeply excavate the heavy, thick taproot of the plant, bringing it back to the quiet shelter. Using a heavy, rounded river cobble, they relentlessly pound the tough root against a flat, stone anvil, physically crushing the rigid plant matter into a fibrous, pulpy mass. When this crushed root is vigorously agitated in a woven basket filled with cold, fresh spring water, it releases high concentrations of natural saponins. Slowly, the clear water transforms, producing a thick, luxurious white foam that looks and acts exactly like modern soap. This rich, natural lather is used to gently wash dirt and natural oils from animal hides before tanning, and to deeply clean the skin and hair of the community members, leaving behind a subtle, fresh, and deeply earthy fragrance that lingers long into the cool, quiet evening. Carving a permanent, heat-resistant cooking vessel out of solid rock is an exercise in profound patience and continuous rhythmic abrasion. A craftsman selects a large, rounded block of heavy statite, commonly known as soapstone, renowned for its dense, naturally soft, and soapy texture. Because the stone is soft enough to be scratched by a fingernail, the artisan does not use heavy, shattering blows. Instead, they take a sharply pointed nodule of much harder quartz and begin to methodically scrape away the center of the block. With a mesmerizing, repetitive circular motion, they slowly grind a shallow, dusty depression into the heart of the stone. The process creates a fine, pale gray powder that coats the maker's hands and settles softly onto the earth. Hours of continuous, rhythmic gouging gradually hollows out the rock, leaving behind a thick-walled, perfectly symmetrical stone bowl that can be placed directly into a blazing fire without ever cracking, providing generations of reliable, simmering nourishment. The engineering of a passive, submerged fish trap demonstrates a brilliant, quiet understanding of aquatic behavior and structural geometry. In the early spring, weavers harvest hundreds of long, highly flexible willow shoots, keeping them constantly damp to maintain their bendable nature. They begin by weaving a large cylindrical outer basket, tying the intersecting rods tightly together with thin strips of soaked inner bark. The true ingenuity, however, lies in the construction of the entrance. The artisan weaves a second, much smaller, funnel-shaped cone that points so directly inward, inserting it securely into the open mouth of the main cylinder. When placed into a narrow, fast-flowing stream channel and weighted down with heavy stones, fish naturally swim into the wide mouth of the funnel. However, once they pass through the narrow, inward-pointing spikes of the inner cone, they find it geometrically impossible to turn around and escape. This silent, unmoving hunter works continuously through the night, passively gathering essential protein while the entire community rests peacefully, accessing the incredibly dense, life-sustaining nutrients hidden deep within the skeletal structure of harvested animals requires precise, calculated percussive force. A forager retrieves the long, heavy femur of a large grazing mammal, laying it horizontally across a solid, flat limestone anvil. Rather than smashing the bone wildly and creating dangerous, microscopic splinters that would ruin the food, the artisan carefully examines the natural ridges and structural fault lines of the calcium shaft. Holding a heavy, smooth quartzite hammerstone, they deliver a single, immensely powerful, perfectly targeted strike directly to the very center of the bone. The intense kinetic energy travels through the rigid material, causing the thick bone to cleanly and audibly fracture straight down the middle in two perfect halves. Inside, the hollow cavity is completely filled with a rich, soft, pale yellow marrow. This fatty, highly caloric tissue is meticulously scooped out using a specialized, carved wooden spatula, providing a vital, easily digestible source of deep winter energy for the growing children of the tribe. The quiet, methodical harvesting of wild bracket fungi provides the community with essential, versatile materials for both firecraft and natural medicine. A gatherer searches the damp, shaded birch forests, looking for the smooth, gray-brown, hoof-shaped growths of the birch polypore mushroom, clinging tightly to the decaying trunks of fallen trees. Using a sharp flint blade, they carefully pry the tough, corky fungus away from the bark. Back at the camp, the mushroom is thinly sliced and laid out to dry entirely. The warm sun, the soft, incredibly dense inner flesh of the dried fungus serves as an absolutely perfect, slow-burning tinder, able to catch and hold the weakest, microscopic spark from a fire drill. Additionally, the thin, flexible outer skin of the mushroom naturally possesses powerful antiseptic and styptic properties. When peeled away in thin strips, it is wrapped tightly around minor cuts and abrasions on the hands of the flint knappers, acting as a breathable, self-adhering bandage that actively prevents infection and promotes rapid, peaceful healing. The creation of a specialized delicate paintbrush allows prehistoric artists to apply fluid, sweeping lines of vibrant pigment to the rough limestone canvas. An artisan begins by carefully sorting through a small bundle of stiff, coarse guard hairs gathered from the mane of a wild horse or the thick winter coat of a badger. They align the natural tips of the hairs perfectly, ensuring the finished brush will have a smooth, unified edge. To create the handle, they select a thin, hollow bone from a large bird, grinding the end flat against a rough piece of sandstone. The aligned bundle of animal hair is carefully pinched together and pushed deep into the hollow cavity of the bone. To secure the bristles permanently, the maker firmly taps a tiny carved wooden wedge directly into the center of the hair bundle, expanding the fibers and locking them tightly against the interior walls of the bone. This meticulously crafted tool transforms thick, ground ochre into graceful, enduring strokes of ancient, quiet expression, constructing a profoundly warm, deeply comforting winter blanket from small rabbit pelts. Involves a brilliant, highly specialized weaving technique, maximizes insulation. Because individual rabbit skins are far too fragile to be stitched together directly, an artisan must first carefully cut the cured hides into single, continuous spiral strips. Using a remarkably sharp obsidian microblade, they slice the soft leather in two long, thin, furry ribbons. These delicate twisting strips are then gently wrapped and twined tightly around a core of strong twisted hemp cordage, creating incredibly thick, fluffy ropes of pure, insulating fur. The weaver then stakes out a large, rectangular wooden frame upon the earth, using plain plant fibers for the vertical warp. The heavy, fur-wrapped ropes are meticulously woven horizontally, passing over and under the warp threads, slowly building a dense, flexible, and incredibly heavy fabric. The resulting blanket provides an impenetrable, utterly soft barrier against the freezing air, wrapping the sleeping community in a profound, heavy layer of enduring warmth and quiet comfort. The extraction of animal sinew provides early humans with the strongest, most resilient natural thread available for heavy tailoring and tool binding. A hunter carefully removes the long, thick tendons running alongside the spine of a fallen deer, keeping the fibrous tissue as completely intact as possible. These heavy, silvery bands of connective tissue are laid out across a flat limestone boulder and left entirely to dry in the bright, cold air until they sickle, become stiff, rigid, and slightly translucent. Once the material has completely hardened, a craftswoman takes a smooth, rounded piece of dense basalt and begins to rhythmically, gently pound the dried tendon against the rock anvil. This careful, percussive action slowly shatters the tough outer casing, causing the solid block of tissue to separate into hundreds of incredibly fine, individual fibers. By moistening these silken threads in their mouth, the artisans can easily twist them together, creating a perfectly smooth, exceptionally strong cordage that actually shrinks as it dries, locking stitched leather seams and bound weapon joints into an unbreakable, permanent hold. Transitioning from chipped flint to polished stone tools requires a profound shift in manufacturing technique, trading sharp percussive strikes for days of hope. Relentless, rhythmic abrasion. A toolmaker selects a dense, heavy cobble of dark basalt from the icy riverbed, specifically chosen for its tight, unyielding crystalline structure. Instead of striking flakes away, they use a fist-sized hammerstone made of home, harder quartz to continuously methodically peck at the surface of the basalt, crushing away microscopic grains of rock, one tiny impact at a time. This exhausting, incredibly loud process slowly shapes the raw cobble into a tapered, wedge-like form. To finalize the chopping edge, the maker carries the roughed-out axe head to a large, stationary slab of wet sandstone. Grasping the heavy basalt firmly in both hands, they push it back and forth across the wet sand, a deep, grinding motion that continues for countless hours. This patient, sheer physical endurance eventually yields a beautifully smooth, highly polished cutting edge that will not shatter upon heavy impact, allowing the community to fell massive trees and construct permanent winter fortifications. Working with raw volcanic obsidian demands an entirely different, incredibly delicate approach to stone craft, as the glass-like material is highly unpredictable and dangerously sharp. A napper sits cross-legged on a heavy leather mat, holding a large, translucent, black nodule of the volcanic stone. Rather than striking it with heavy, swinging blows, they utilize a technique known as soft hammer percussion, using a dense, rounded baton carved from the base of a moose antler. They strike the very edge of the obsidian with a glancing, perfectly calculated downward motion, sending a long, rippling shockwave directly through the core. This precise impact detaches a remarkably long, thin, and perfectly straight blade, possessing a cutting edge literally a single molecule thick. To refine this fragile blade into a usable knife, the maker presses a pointed bone flaker against the margins, popping off microscopic chips to create a strengthened, serrated profile. This mastery of structural geometry produces a cutting implement far sharper than modern surgical steel, essential for cleanly processing thick hides without tearing the delicate underlying fat, protecting the vulnerable human skin from the relentless swarms of summer insects. Relies on the deep ancestral knowledge of localized botanical chemistry. As the heavy humidity settles across the river valley, a gatherer walks through the tall, dense grasses, carefully plucking the silvery green leaves of wild mugwort and sweetgrass. Returning to the shaded perimeter of the camp, they sit upon a woven mat and place the fresh herbs into a shallow wooden bowl. Using a smooth, rounded river stone, they systematically crush the fibrous out leaves, pressing heavily until the plant fibers rupture and release their strong, highly pungent essential oils. Taking small handfuls of this crushed, damp vegetation, the community members firmly rub the bruised leaves directly across their exposed arms, legs, and faces. The thick, aromatic oils coat the skin in a thin, slightly sticky barrier that naturally repels biting flies and mosquitoes. To protect the communal sleeping area, heavy bundles of these exact same herbs are tossed onto the smoldering evening hearth, producing a thick, fragrant smoke that silently clears the shelter of all airborne pests. Mastering the hand drill method of friction fire requires supreme physical conditioning, relying entirely on the uninterrupted downward momentum of the human hands. A firemaker selects a perfectly straight, highly dried stalk of wild mullein, for the spindle, and a flat, soft piece of clematis wood for the baseboard. Kneeling closely over the hearthboard, they place the tip of the spindle into a small, pre-carved notch, pressing their open palms tightly against the very top of the wooden stalk. With a rapid, aggressive motion, they begin to rub their hands back and forth, spinning the drill while simultaneously pressing their weight downward. As their hands naturally slide down the smooth stalk, they execute a brilliant, split-second movement known as the floating technique. Without ever stopping the rapid rotation of the spindle, they swiftly glide their hands back to the top of the stalk in a single fluid motion. This continuous, relentless friction rapidly builds a microscopic pile of balls. Intensely hot, dark brown dust in the notch, eventually birthing a tiny, glowing, self-sustaining coal from sheer human exertion. Carving a barbed harpoon point from dense animal bone allows early fishers to securely capture large, struggling aquatic prey in deep, fast-moving currents. An artisan begins by taking a long, heavy splinter of a shattered reindeer's femur, previously soaked in warm water for several days to soften the rigidity. Calcium matrix. Using a thick, jagged piece of unrefined flint, they aggressively saw back and forth across the bone, slowly tapering one end into a sharp, lethal point. The true complexity lies in carving the deeply recessed, backward-facing barbs along the side of the shaft. The maker uses a specialized tiny stone burin, twisting the sharp point into the side of the bone to carve out deep, precise, V-shaped notches. They meticulously grind the inner edges of these notches with wet sand, ensuring the barbs are smooth enough to penetrate thick scales, but aggressively hooked enough to never pull free. Once firmly bound to a long wooden shaft, this brilliantly engineered, multi-barbed weapon ensures that a forcefully struck, heavy salmon cannot thrash itself off the line, securing vital aquatic protein. The processing of black birch tar serves not only as an industrial adhesive, but also as a highly effective, natural method for maintaining vital dental hygiene. After extracting the thick, sticky pitch from buried tree bark through a process of slow, oxygen-deprived roasting, the dark resin is allowed to cool and harden into solid glass-like chunks. When an early human wishes to clean their teeth, they select a small piece of this hardened tar and place it into their mouth, letting their natural body heat slowly soften the rigid material. As they begin to methodically chew, the tar transforms into a remarkably tough, highly resilient gum. The continuous, heavy pressure of chewing this dense material physically pulls trapped food, particles, and dangerous plaque away from the gum line, deeply cleaning the intricate grooves of the molars. Furthermore, the pitch contains high concentrations of natural betulin, a powerful antiseptic compound that actively fights oral infections and soothes inflamed tissues, a quiet medicinal habit that perfectly preserves the essential grinding power of the prehistoric jaw. The creation of small, fired clay figurines represents a deeply symbolic, artistic translation of the human form, requiring careful thermal management to prevent catastrophic shattering. An artist scoops a handful of fine yellow loess clay from the steep, eroded banks of a dry riverbed, wetting it just enough to form a highly pliable, cohesive paste. With slow, deliberate pinches of their thumbs and forefingers, they mold their earth, emphasizing the heavy curves of the hips and the roundness of the torso, creating a beautiful, stylized representation of fertility and survival. Before this delicate sculpture can be placed anywhere near a fire, it must be left in the dry, shaded air for over a week, allowing all the trapped microscopic water molecules to slowly evaporate from the deep core. Once completely bone dry, the figurine is not placed directly into the flames, but gently nestled into the warm gray ashes at the very edge of the communal hearth. This gradual ambient baking slowly hardens the clay into a permanent reddish ceramic, quietly immortalizing the human image in solid stone, shaping a smooth, functional culinary utensil from a piece of raw hardwood. Demands the careful utilization of unique, naturally occurring biological tools. A carver selects a thick, split section of green maple, a wood known for its tight grain and resistance to splitting, harnigaus, to rapidly remove the heavy, excess material. They employ a fascinating implement, the lower jawbone of a harvested beaver, with the incredibly sharp, curved orange incisor still firmly attached. Gripping the jawbone tightly, the artisan uses the naturally beveled animal tooth as a highly efficient wood plane, peeling away long, curling strips of the maple with deep, satisfying pulling motions. Once the rough shape of a long-handled spatula is achieved, they switch to a small, sharp piece of flint, gently scraping the surface over and over to erase the deep gouges left by the tooth. Finally, the finished wooden tool is aggressively rubbed with a handful of foul, rough, abrasive horsetail reeds, polishing the wood to a silky, splinter-free finish, perfectly prepared for continuously stirring the heavy, simmering stews of the winter hearth. Splitting massive, fallen tree trunks into manageable, usable wooden planks requires a brilliant exploitation of structural wedges and overwhelming percussive force. A woodworker cannot chop down a massive oak tree with a small stone hand axe, so they scavenge large, heavy beams from naturally fallen timber. To split the wood along its natural grain, they craft heavy wedges out of the thickest, lowest sections of shed elk antlers. Using a heavy piece of coarse sandstone, they grind the base of the antler down into a sharp, highly durable chisel point. The artisan finds a natural hairline crack running down the length of the fallen log and firmly taps the pointed antler wedge directly into the fissure, using a heavy wooden mallet. As they strike the flat back of the antler with rhythmic, swinging heavy blows, the tough bone wedge is driven deeper and deeper into the timber. The mechanical physics of the wedge forcibly push the wood fibers apart, producing a loud, cracking tear that smoothly splits the solid ancient log neatly in two, providing flat boards for shelter. The assembly of a composite harvesting sickle demonstrates a remarkable leap in prehistoric manufacturing, combining multiple specialized materials into a single, highly efficient tool. An artisan selects a naturally curved piece of dense hawthorn wood, using a heavy flint chisel to carefully gouge a deep, continuous groove along the inner edge of the curve. Instead of attempting to knap one impossibly long stone blade, they strike dozens of tiny, razor-sharp rectangular microliths from a prepared core of naive, high-quality chert. These small, standardized stone teeth are meticulously inserted side by side into the wooden groove, aligned so their sharpest edges form a continuous, deeply serrated line. To lock the microliths permanently in place, the maker heats a mixture of sticky pine resin and crushed beeswax, pouring the molten adhesive over the seated stones. As the resin cools and hardens into a tough cement, the finished sickle provides a remarkably effective instrument for effortlessly slicing through thick stands of wild, golden wheat, transforming the exhausting labor of the autumn harvest into a smooth, rhythmic motion. Constructing a lightweight, watertight foraging vessel from raw birch bark requires precise geometric folding and the delicate manipulation of natural plant tensions. A gatherer uses a sharp stone flake to score a large rectangular sheet of pale bark peeled seamlessly from a mature tree. Rather than cutting the corners away, they carefully heat the tough material over a smoldering fire to soften the rigid natural resins. Once the bark is entirely pliable, the artisan skillfully folds the corners inward, overlapping the layers to create a deep, seamless rectangular basin, without any cuts or weak points at the base. To secure the folded sides, they use an incredibly sharp bone awl to pierce a line of small, evenly spaced holes through the layered bark. A long, damp and highly flexible root of a spruce tree is then threaded tightly through the holes, binding the vessel together with strong, overlapping stitches. Finally, the seams are heavily painted with warm liquid spruce pitch, completely sealing the geometric container to safely carry fresh water or crushed berries. The engineering of functional snowshoes allows prehistoric hunters to silently traverse deep, treacherous winter drifts without exhausting their vital calorie reserves. A craftsman begins by selecting a long, incredibly straight sapling of white ash, a wood prized for its profound flexibility. The green wood is thoroughly soaked in a hot spring or steamed over a wet fire, allowing the artisan to physically bend the thick sapling into a wide teardrop shape without fracturing the dense internal fibers. The overlapping ends are firmly lashed together at the tail using wet strips of raw deer hide. To create the weight-bearing deck, the maker tightly weaves a complex hexagonal matrix of thin, semi-translucent rawhide strips across the wooden frame. As this damp webbing slowly dries in the crisp, freezing air, the rawhide naturally contracts with immense force, pulling the wooden frame into permanent tension and creating a rigid, highly buoyant platform. When strapped to winter boots, these brilliant wooden webs evenly distribute the wearer's weight, allowing them to glide effortlessly over the pristine, untouched snowpack. The slow extraction of deep, vibrant color from the earth reveals a sophisticated, early understanding of botanical chemistry and thermal saturation. A gatherer specifically targets the thick, sprawling roots of the wild madder plant, digging deep into the loamy soil to uncover the pale, fibrous tendrils. Back at the settlement, these roots are thoroughly washed, chopped into small segments with a stone cleaver, and aggressively pounded into a coarse, reddish pulp against a flat granite slab. This raw pulp is transferred into a heavy, water-filled statite bowl, brought to a very slow, continuous simmer using preheated river stones. As the water slowly heats, the water-soluble alizarin compounds within the root begin to break down, bleeding a rich, brilliant crimson dye into the steaming liquid. Bundles of pale, spun flax or carefully prepared animal hair are completely submerged into the hot, dark red bath, continuously stirred with a wooden paddle to ensure an even, flawless absorption. Once removed and dried, the fibers permanently retain the vibrant, earthy red hue, bringing beautiful, lasting color to their woven garments. The crafting of an aerodynamic throwing stick relies entirely on a profound Intuitive mastery of physics, wind resistance, and rotational inertia. An artisan selects a naturally curved branch of heavy, dense oak, deliberately, utilizing the hardened, interlocking wood grain found near the root base. Using a heavy flint adze, they carefully chop away the excess wood, slowly, revealing a flat, crescent-shaped profile. The true brilliance of the design lies in the meticulous shaping of the edges. The maker uses a rough piece of sandstone to deeply abrade the top surface in two, a gentle convex curve, while leaving the bottom entirely flat, creating a true, primitive airfoil. When held securely by one end and violently hurled horizontally across the open plains, this heavy, specialized stick spins rapidly through the air, generating its own localized lift. This remarkable rotational stability allows the heavy wooden projectile to fly straight and true for incredible distances, flying mere inches above the tall grasses to silently and efficiently strike small, fast-moving ground prey with devastating, highly concentrated kinetic force. The carving of a finely toothed bone comb provides a vital, multifunctional tool necessary for maintaining personal hygiene and organizing tough plant fibers. A worker selects a wide, flat section of a large mammoth rib or bovine shoulder blade, boiling the heavy bone for hours to extract the grease and soften the rigid structure. Using a heavy piece of deeply serrated flint, they painstakingly saw straight across the top, establishing a smooth, perfectly flat working edge. The most tedious phase requires carving the individual teeth, a task demanding intense visual focus and incredibly steady hands. Using a tiny razor-sharp stone burehead, the artisan slowly scratches deep, parallel grooves down the face of the bone, deepening the cuts millimeter by millimeter until the negative space falls away. The resulting tines are meticulously rounded and polished, with a handful of wet sand and soft leather, ensuring they will not snag or tear. This beautiful, smooth tool is then used to vigorously card tangled bundles of wild flax, perfectly aligning the fibers for spinning into strong, enduring thread, transforming fragile, sun-dried clay vessels into permanent, waterproof ceramics. Requires a perfectly timed, highly dangerous mastery of subterranean fire. A community of potters begins by digging a shallow, wide trench in the dry earth, lining the absolute bottom with a thick, insulating layer of highly combustible, dry moss and crushed pine cones. The delicate, bone-dry clay pots are nested carefully into this soft bed, close together to mutually support their weight during the intense chemical transformation. The artisans then pile massive amounts of heavy, slow-burning hardwood directly over the vessels, completely burying the clay in a towering mound of timber. Once ignited, the massive fire is allowed to burn fiercely for hours, generating a localized, incredibly intense heat that safely penetrates the soil and drives the microscopic, chemically bound water directly out of the clay matrix. After the roaring flames inevitably die down, the glowing red-hot ash is left entirely undisturbed for a full day. This agonizingly slow cooling process prevents thermal shock, eventually yielding hardened, beautiful, smoke-blackened pottery that rings sharply when tapped. The careful extraction of crystalline sea salt provides an absolutely essential dietary mineral, crucial for retaining bodily hydration and preserving vital winter meats. A specialized gatherer wades out into the shallow tidal pools of the ancient coastline, filling large watertight skin bags with the heavy, remarkably clear. Ocean water. This pristine brine is carried back to a sheltered rocky outcrop and carefully poured into a series of wide, incredibly shallow pans carved directly into the faux sun-baked bedrock. To accelerate the natural evaporation, the worker occasionally drops fist-sized, red-hot stones taken directly from the fire into the shallow pools of brine. As the intense heat and the constant, dry sea breeze rapidly pull the moisture away into the air, the water slowly recedes, leaving behind a thick, sparkling crust of pure white sodium chloride. Using a flat, carved wooden scraper, the gatherer meticulously piles these vanticuline, precious, gleaming crystals into small mounds, scooping the dried salt into hollowed-out gourds to be traded inland, bringing profound flavor and powerful preservation to the distant, landlocked communities. The construction of a passive, nearly invisible snare relies on the unique, unyielding tensile strength of long strands of wild horsehair. A trapper carefully selects a dozen of the longest, coarsest hairs retrieved from the tail of a fallen wild equine, washing them thoroughly in the cold river to remove the natural, slippery oils. Unlike plant fibers which can stretch or rot in the damp snow, these dense, keratin threads are completely impervious to moisture and freezing temperatures. The artisan groups the coarse hairs together, moistening them slightly before twisting them continuously between their thumb and forefinger into a tight, incredibly stiff, and flawlessly smooth microcable. At one end, they tie a microscopic, non-slipping loop knot, threading the other end directly through to create a perfectly round, free-sliding noose. This delicate, springy trap is then carefully suspended across a narrow, heavily worn animal trail in the deep brush, perfectly camouflaged against the dark winter branches, providing a silent, reliable, and continuous method of securing essential small game while the trapper works elsewhere, manipulating the exceptionally hard, unforgiving structure of thick deer antler into customized ergonomic tool handles requires a brilliant understanding of thermal softening. An artisan removes the heavy, branching crown of an antler, placing the thickest, most rigid sections directly into a boiling, bubbling skin bag of hot water. The continuous, rolling heat slowly penetrates the dense calcium and collagen matrix, gently breaking down the internal structural bonds over several hours. Once the antler turns a slightly paler shade and yields to heavy pressure, the craftsman quickly pulls the steaming, incredibly hot material from the water. While it remains superheated and pliable, they wedge the thick bone into the fork of a living tree, using their entire body weight to forcefully bend and permanently warp the antler into a distinct, specialized curve. As the material cools in the crisp air, the collagen fibers instantly lock back into their rigid, unbreakable state. This tailored, sweeping shape perfectly matches the natural swing of the human arm, instantly turning a simple flint blade into a devastatingly efficient, heavy-duty woodworking adze. The construction of a reliable dugout canoe requires the slow, masterful orchestration of destructive fire and relentless scraping. To fell a massive ancient pine without a metal saw, woodworkers pack the base of the living tree with damp clay, protecting the upper trunk while a heavy, localized fire slowly burns entirely through the root system. Once the towering tree inevitably falls, the true labor begins. Artisans strip away the rough bark and lay a continuous line of glowing red-hot coals directly along the top center of the massive log. They fan the embers continuously, using large woven grass mats, driving the intense heat downward to deeply char the inner heartwood. As the wood completely blackens and turns to brittle charcoal, the workers use heavy, polished stone adzes to chip the burnt material away with rhythmic, echoing strikes. This careful, alternating cycle of burning and scraping continues methodically for several weeks, gradually hollowing out the solid timber until it transforms into a remarkably buoyant, perfectly balanced vessel capable of navigating the course deep, winding river systems, transforming a massive, thick-walled ostrich egg into a durable, lightweight water carrier relies on delicate percussive drilling and natural sealing techniques. When a gatherer successfully secures an abandoned egg from the arid plains, they do not simply smash it open. Instead, they stabilize the heavy shell in a soft bed of sand, taking an incredibly sharp, pressure-flaked chert drill bit between their fingertips. With a rapid twisting motion, they carefully bore a single, perfectly circular hole into the very top of the curved shell, slowly grinding through the tough, calcified layers without fracturing the entire structure. A long, hollow reed is inserted into the tiny opening to carefully suck out the rich, nutritious yolk and albumin, providing an immediate high-protein meal. Once completely emptied and rinsed with coarse sand, the interior of the shell naturally dries into a sterile, hard-walled basin. A tiny plug of carved corkwood and worn beeswax perfectly seals the opening, creating an essential, heat-resistant flask that allows nomadic foragers to comfortably cross vast, unforgiving stretches of waterless desert. The carving of a wooden bull roarer provides early human communities with a profound, non-vocal method of long-distance, acoustic communication. An artisan begins by selecting a long, flat, and remarkably straight piece of aged, heavy hardwood, usually harvested from a lightning-struck oak or dense juniper. Using a heavy piece of jagged flint, they meticulously shave the flat board down into an elongated, aerodynamic diamond shape, tapering the edges until they are incredibly thin and completely symmetrical. A small circular hole is drilled straight through the narrowest end using a tiny stone awl, and a long, heavily twisted cord of braided dogbane fiber is threaded through and secured with a tight, non-slipping knot. When a communicator steps out into the open valley and swings this flat wooden blade rapidly in a wide circle above their head, the aerodynamic profile forcefully slices through the heavy air. This rapid rotation generates a deep, low-frequency and highly resonant humming vibration that carries for miles, successfully coordinating distant hunting parties through the dense, echoing forest. The careful extraction of sweet birch sap marks the very beginning of the spring thaw, providing a vital influx of deep hydration and natural sugars after a long, exhausting winter. As the frozen earth finally begins to soften and the internal pressure of the undecode trees violently rises, a gatherer approaches a mature, silver-barked birch. Using a heavy, wedge-shaped stone chisel, they make a single, precise, upward-angled cut through the papery outer bark, penetrating just deeply enough to reach the flowing xylem layer without permanently damaging the living cambium. They carve a small grooved spout from a hollowed elderberry twig, gently tapping it directly into the open wooden wound. Almost immediately, a steady, rhythmic dripping begins, releasing clear, cold, and incredibly pure water that carries a faint, remarkably sweet and earthy flavor. A tightly woven, pitch-sealed basket is hung carefully beneath the wooden tap to collect the steady flow over several hours. This pristine, mineral-rich liquid is consumed immediately to naturally cleanse the body, or slowly boiled down in hot stones to create a thick, highly caloric syrup. Preserving the massive, overwhelming yield of a successful, large-game hunt requires the brilliant utilization of the naturally frozen subterranean earth. When a mammoth or steppe bison is harvested during the brief summer thaw, the thaw meat must be immediately protected from rapid decay and aggressive scavenging predators. The community works together to excavate a deep, narrow pit directly into the farm. Unforgiving permafrost, using heavy, fire-hardened wooden digging sticks to slowly chip away at the rock-hard, ice-bound soil. The bottom of this natural freezing cellar is heavily lined with thick layers of dry, insulating mammoth hair and crushed bone fragments. Massive, heavy quarters of fresh muscle tissue are lowered carefully into the freezing chamber, completely separated by insulating layers of green pine boughs, to prevent the pieces from freezing into a single, immovable blob. The top of the pit is securely capped with heavy limestone boulders and packed tightly with wet, freezing mud. This remarkable prehistoric freezer flawlessly preserves thousands of pounds of essential, life-giving protein, ensuring the entire community will survive the encroaching, brutal winter. Weaving a highly functional, completely waterproof rain cape from wild plant materials requires an intricate understanding of natural fiber direction and overlapping geometry. Gatherers harvest hundreds of long, flexible cattail leaves from the muddy edges of the late summer marsh, carefully drying them in the shade to prevent the fibers from becoming brittle and snapping. To construct the garment, a weaver creates a sturdy horizontal upper yoke from tightly twined strands of wild hemp, perfectly sized to rest comfortably across the human shoulders. Instead of weaving a solid, flat fabric, the artisan folds the long cattail leaves and huff directly over the hemp cord, letting the remaining lengths hang straight down in a thick, dense fringe. Row upon row of these overlapping leaves are tightly twined together, mimicking the natural layered structure of a bird's feathers. When heavy, relentless rain falls upon the finished cape, the water naturally catches the slick, downward-facing surface of the overlapping cattails smoothly, rolling off the material and keeping the wearer perfectly dry, warm, and highly insulated from the chilling winds. The engineering of a heavy multi-stone bola represents a brilliant mastery of centrifugal force, specifically designed to tangle and ground fast-moving avian prey. A hunter begins by carefully selecting 3 smooth, perfectly rounded river cobbles, ensuring each stone is virtually identical in weight to guarantee a flawless, balanced rotation in the air. Using a heavy piece of coarse sandstone, the artisan relentlessly grinds a deep, continuous, and highly pronounced groove around the exact center of each heavy stone. They take a long, incredibly strong cord made from deeply braided animal sinew, tightly tying one end into the deep groove of the rock, locking it permanently in place. The 3 separate cords, each roughly an arm's length, are then firmly knotted together at a single, central point. When the hunter spots a low-flying flock of heavy geese, they grasp the central knot, rapidly swinging the 3 heavy stones above their head. When released, the bola violently spreads out into a wide, spinning web of heavy, cordage silently flying through the air to instantly entangle the prey. Constructing a lightweight, resilient defensive shield requires the careful manipulation of animal rawhide and the structural tension of bent wood. A craftsman begins by cutting a thick, flexible branch of green willow, slowly bending it into a perfect wide circle and securely lashing the overlapping ends. Together with wet, highly pliable strips of animal intestine, they select the thickest, heaviest portion of a raw, untanned bison hide, specifically taken from the heavily armored neck of the massive animal. While the thick rawhide is still completely saturated and dripping with river water, it is stretched incredibly tight across the circular wooden hoop. Using a sharp bone awl, the maker punches a series of holes around the outer edge, tightly lashing the hide to the wooden frame with a continuous spiral of heavy sinew. As the wet rawhide is left to dry in the hot, baking sun, it violently shrinks and contracts, pulling the wooden frame into an impossibly rigid, drum-type tension. This lightweight, hardened barrier can effortlessly absorb and deflect the heaviest, most dangerous impacts of a wild, thrashing animal. Building a large communal fish weir across a tidal estuary relies on the brilliant, passive exploitation of natural water currents and tidal shifts. Over several days, the entire community wades into the freezing shallow waters at extreme low tide, carrying hundreds of long, heavy wooden stakes that have been deeply charred and sharpened in the fire. Using massive granite hammerstones, they relentlessly drive these thick wooden posts deep into the soft, muddy bottom of the river, forming a massive V-shaped wall that points directly downstream. The wide gaps between the heavy wooden posts are meticulously filled by interweaving thousands of flexible green hazel saplings, creating a tight, basket-like fence that allows the rushing water to effortlessly pass through, while blocking anything larger than a human hand. As the high tide rolls in, migrating salmon easily swim upstream past the wide opening. But when the tide inevitably drops and the water swiftly recedes, the fish are physically funneled backward into the narrow, unyielding wooden trap, safely securing an overwhelming abundance of rich, oily protein. Enhancing a simple wooden digging stick with a heavy, perfectly balanced stone weight drastically multiplies the mechanical downforce applied to the hard, unyielding earth. A forager selects a heavy, naturally rounded limestone boulder, sitting quietly, with a sharply pointed nodule of quartz. Using continuous, heavy percussive strikes, they painstakingly peck a deep, wide hole straight through the absolute center of the heavy rock, a grueling, exhausting process that often takes several continuous days of rhythmic pounding. They carve a long, thick, fire-hardened shaft from a straight piece of wild ash, specifically tapering the top end. The heavy, perfectly bored stone ring is slid down the wooden shaft until it wedges tightly and permanently near the bottom, just above the charred digging point. When the forager violently thrusts the tool into the baked, concrete-like soil of the summer plains, the immense, added kinetic energy of the heavy stone color drives the wooden point deeply into the ground, effortlessly prying up incredibly deep, massive, and highly nutritious root systems that would otherwise be entirely impossible to reach. The transformation of tall, wild flax into fine, incredibly strong linen thread requires days of patient, methodical labor and a deep understanding of plant decay. Gatherers harvest the slender green stalks late in the summer, tying them into loose bundles and submerging them completely in a shallow, slow-moving pool of cotton river water. This crucial soaking process, known as retting, invites microscopic bacteria to slowly dissolve the sticky cellular pectin binding the outer bark. After several weeks, the softened bundles are laid out to dry entirely in the crisp autumn sun, turning a pale golden brown. Once perfectly brittle, the artisan lays the stalks across a wooden log, rhythmically beating them with a smooth, heavy wooden mallet. This satisfying percussive action shatters the woody outer core, cleanly separating the long silver-gray inner fibers without breaking them. Finally, these silken threads are carefully combed through a bed of sharp thorns, aligning the fibers perfectly before they are gently twisted between thumb and forefinger into a resilient, beautiful cordage. Constructing a lightweight, watertight foraging basket from raw birch bark demands a delicate touch and precise geometric folding. In the early spring, when the tree's natural sap is rising, a gatherer makes a single, shallow vertical cut into the white bark of a fallen birch, carefully peeling away a large, flawless, rectangular sheet. Rather than cutting corners that could weaken the vessel, the artisan holds the tough material near the radiant heat of the hearth. The warm air gently melts the natural resins within the bark, rendering it beautifully soft and pliable. With measured, deliberate movements, they fold the corners inward, overlapping the thick layers to create a deep, seamless rectangular basin. Using a sharply pointed bone awl, they punch a perfectly spaced line of tiny holes through the folded seams. A long, damp, and highly flexible root of a spruce tree is then tightly threaded through the openings, binding the basket with strong, overlapping stitches that will completely waterproof the vessel once the pitch naturally cools and hardens. The engineering of a heavy, hefted stone adze perfectly utilizes the natural, unyielding contraction of drying rawhide to permanently lock separate materials together. A craftsman begins by carving a thick, L-shaped handle from the dense, interlocking grain of a hawthorn branch, ensuring the wooden head is perfectly flat and smooth. A polished wedge of heavy dark basalt is meticulously aligned against this flat, wooden face. Instead of tying the stone with plant fibers, which might stretch and loosen upon heavy impact, the maker takes a long, thick strip of fresh, completely saturated deer rawhide directly from the cold river, wrapping the dripping, highly elastic leather tightly around both the stone and both the wood. They pull the binding with all their physical strength, securing it with a complex tucking knot. As the wet rawhide is left to rest in the dry circulating air, it violently shrinks and stiffens, naturally clamping the heavy basalt blade to the wooden handle with an impossibly rigid, bone-crushing tension that will endure generations of heavy woodworking. Preparing a massive harvest of dense, fibrous roots requires a slow, communal cooking method that traps intense heat deep within the earth itself. The community begins by excavating a wide circular pit in the soft soil, lining the absolute bottom with flat, rounded river cobbles. A roaring fire of hard oak is built directly on top of these stones, allowed to burn fiercely for hours, until it collapses into a glowing, radiant bed of white-hot embers. The hearthkeeper uses long, green saplings to carefully sweep the remaining ash away, revealing the intensely heated rocks below. Thick, damp layers of broad green fern leaves and sweetgrass are laid heavily over the stones, instantly producing a thick, fragrant cloud of hissing steam. The harvested, unpeeled roots are piled directly onto the steaming vegetation, completely sealed beneath another thick layer of wet leaves, and finally buried under a heavy mound of damp earth. This subterranean oven safely cooks the tough tubers for days, breaking down complex starches into sweet, easily digestible, and deeply nourishing survival food. Extracting natural pain relief from the ancient forests relies on a quiet, highly localized knowledge of bark chemistry and thermal steeping. When a member of the community suffers from inflamed joints or a deep, aching fever, a healer walks slowly to the damp edges of the watershed. Using a sharp, pressure-flaked obsidian flake, they carefully slice a few thin, green strips of inner bark from the pliable branches of a white willow tree, taking only what is immediately necessary. Returning to the quiet shelter, the bitter green ribbons are placed into a hollowed-out wooden bowl filled with clear, cold spring water. Using long wooden tongs, the healer lifts a single, glowing, red-hot stone from the central fire, dropping it gently into the wooden vessel. The water instantly boils, rolling aggressively and slowly drawing out the pale, yellowish salicin compounds hidden within the plant fibers. As the hot liquid eventually cools and settles, it becomes a warm, earthy, and powerfully soothing tea that quickly quiets the heavy, throbbing aches of an exhausting winter. The seasonal harvest of wild acorns provides an incredibly abundant, calorie-dense food source, though making them edible requires a patient, multi-step process to wash away their naturally toxic tannins. Foragers return with heavy woven baskets overflowing with the smooth brown nuts, sitting together to carefully crack the shells open using small, rounded hammerstones. The pale, nutritious kernels inside are tossed into deep wooden mortars and hutched, rhythmically pounded into a remarkably fine, golden flour, filling the crisp air with a rich, deeply comforting nutty aroma. Because this raw meal is highly astringent and dangerous to consume, the artisans construct a wide, shallow basin out of clean, tightly packed river sand. The acorn flour is spread thinly across the porous sandy bowl, and cool, fresh water is continuously, gently poured over the top. As the water slowly filters down through the flour and disappears into the earth beneath, it actively pulls the bitter water-soluble tannins away. After an entire day of continuous rinsing, the sweet, purified flour is finally ready to be baked into dense, life-sustaining flatbreads. The intricate carving of a tiny, curved fishhook from a solid piece of deer antler represents a profound, deeply focused mastery of miniature aquatic engineering. An artisan sits beside the glowing embers, selecting a thick, dense section of the tough antler. With a heavy, deeply serrated flint saw, they employ rhythmic, patient back and forth motions to cut a small, flat rectangle, heavily abrading the edges against a wet piece of coarse sandstone until it is perfectly smooth. Using a remarkably sharp, pointed stone buran, they meticulously scratch and hollow out the absolute center of the rectangle, slowly transforming the solid plate into a delicate, U-shaped hook. The most challenging, delicate step involves carving a tiny, backward-facing barb near the sharpened tip, requiring incredibly steady, precise hand movements to ensure the delicate point does not snap under sudden pressure. Finally, a small horizontal groove is carefully etched around the flat upper shank, providing a secure, non-slipping anchor point where a fine, twisted line of nettle fiber can be tightly and permanently bound. Engineering a highly efficient permanent winter hearth requires a profound understanding of thermal mass and the slow, radiant distribution of deep heat, rather than building a chaotic fire directly upon the damp cave floor. The hearthkeeper carefully gathers dozens of heavy, flat slabs of dense, non-porous limestone, specifically avoiding soft river rocks that might violently shatter. When heated, they excavate a shallow, wide depression in the packed earth, tightly paving the bottom with the smooth stones to create an insulated, fireproof foundation. Around the perimeter, they methodically stack the thickest limestone blocks to form a high, continuous, U-shaped retaining wall, specifically angled to face the dark interior of the sleeping quarters. As the heavy oak logs burn down into glowing, white-hot embers, the immense density of the surrounding stone architecture actively absorbs the intense energy. Long after the actual flames have entirely died out, these massive, superheated rocks continue to quietly radiate a deep, incredibly even, and profoundly comforting warmth into the absolute darkness of the freezing winter night. Constructing a lightweight, highly buoyant watercraft relies on the brilliant tension of woven saplings and the waterproof nature of thick animal hides. A small group of woodworkers begins by harvesting dozens of long, incredibly flexible willow shoots from the damp riverbanks. They firmly plant the thickest ends of these green saplings into the soft earth in a wide circle, carefully bending the flexible tops inward to weave a large, tight, dome-like basket frame. Once the rigid bowl-shaped skeleton is securely lashed together with wet, rawhide strips, it is carefully pulled from the ground and flipped upside down. The artisans drape a massive, freshly tanned bison hide directly over the wooden ribs, pulling the heavy leather incredibly tight across the sweeping curves. The edges of the hide are firmly stitched to the upper wooden rim using an impossibly strong bone awl and twisted sinew. Finally, a thick, boiling layer of black pine pitch is heavily painted over all the exposed seams, creating a silent, beautifully balanced vessel for navigating the deep, winding currents, transforming raw, heavy animal skins into deeply durable, water-resistant leather without the use of smoke relies on a profoundly slow chemical mastery of crushed tree bark. An artisan begins by peeling large, thick strips of rough bark from a mature oak tree, relentlessly pounding the woody material against a stone anvil until it breaks down into a coarse, highly fibrous dust. This pungent, tannin-rich powder is dumped heavily into a deep, watertight pittle, lined with perfectly sealed clay and flooded with cold, fresh spring water. The scraped, raw hides are completely submerged into this dark, murky bath, weighed down with smooth river stones to prevent them from floating to the surface. Over the course of several quiet, freezing months, the powerful natural tannic acids slowly permeate the cellular structure of the skin, chemically binding to the collapsing collagen fibers. When finally pulled from the dark water and stretched out to dry, the finished leather possesses a beautiful, rich mahogany color, incredibly dense and perfectly suited for crafting heavy protective winter boots. The production of heavy industrial-strength animal glue requires the slow, methodical reduction of dense collagen and tough keratin fibers. Artisans gather the hard hooves, heavy joint ligaments, and raw scraps of unused hide. These tough, rubbery materials are thoroughly washed in cold water, then heavily smashed into smaller pieces using a heavy granite cobble against a flat limestone anvil. The fractured pieces are placed into a thick, watertight leather boiling bag, suspended securely from a wooden tripod above a low, smoldering hearth. Foragers continuously drop glowing, white-hot river stones directly into the fair bag, maintaining a slow, rolling simmer for several continuous days. As the intense heat deeply penetrates the connective tissues, they slowly dissolve and break down, leaving behind a thick, deeply amber-colored liquid. When this rich broth is poured onto smooth slates and allowed to cool in the hot, crisp air, it solidifies into translucent, brittle sheets. When gently reheated over a flame, this incredibly sticky resin provides an unbreakable, waterproof bond, essential for reinforcing the lash joints of hunidicamdia, wooden sleds and heavy stone axes, protecting the fragile human eye from the blinding, highly reflective glare of the sunlit winter snowpack. Demands a brilliant, intuitive piece of anatomical carving. A craftsman selects a dense, curved section of raw caribou antler, choosing a piece that naturally mirrors the convex slope of the human brow. Using a heavily serrated flint flake, they painstakingly saw the bone down into a thin rectangular mask, carefully grinding the inner surface against wet sandstone until it rests comfortably across the bridge of the nose. The true mechanical genius lies in the creation of the viewing slits. Instead of drilling wide holes, the artisan uses a microscopic, razor-sharp boran to scratch a single, incredibly narrow horizontal line entirely across the front of the bone. This tightly restricted opening physically blocks the overwhelming, multi-directional scattering of ultraviolet light while perfectly allowing a focused, highly illuminated field of horizontal vision. Secured tightly around the head with a soft strip of brain-tanned buckskin, this simple, profoundly effective shield guarantees safe, painless navigation across the vast, shining glaciers, formulating a highly concentrated, non-perishable survival ration requires the precise combination of dried natural sugars, heavy proteins, and rendered animal fats. Gatherers spend countless hours harvesting tiny, tart cranberries and wild blueberries, spreading them thinly across woven grass mats to completely dehydrate in the baking sun. Once perfectly dry and wrinkled, they are placed into a heavy wooden mortar, alongside strips of deeply smoked, desiccated venison jerky. Using a rounded pestle, the artisan relentlessly pounds the dry ingredients together, physically crushing the meat and fruit into a coarse, highly fibrous powder. This dense, nutrient-rich dust is transferred to a large wooden bowl where the hearthkeeper slowly pours in a steady stream of hot, freshly rendered liquid tallow. The hot fat instantly soaks into the dry fibers, acting as an impenetrable, oxygen-blocking binder. The heavy mixture is tightly packed into deep pouches made of raw animal intestine, naturally cooling into solid, calorie-dense blocks that will remain perfectly safe and deeply nourishing for several unforgiving years. Birthing a sustainable fire without the exhausting physical friction of a wooden drill requires the careful geological pairing of highly specific sparking minerals. A firemaker searches the exposed riverbanks for a heavy, dull gold nodule of iron pyrite, a mineral heavily saturated with natural sulfur. In their other hand, they hold a sharp, heavily angled flake of high-carbon chert, knapped to possess a steep, robust, striking edge. To catch the incredibly brief, low-temperature sparks, The artisan prepares a small nest of deeply charred, highly flammable pith carefully extracted from the center of a dry elderberry branch. Gripping the heavy pyrite nodule tightly, they strike the sharp edge of the pilcher downward with a forceful, glancing, and heavily calculated blow. The sheer mechanical friction violently tears microscopic particles of iron and sulfur from the rock, igniting them instantly. A tiny, brilliant shower of glowing orange sparks cascades directly into the full, dark, carbonized pith, where a single, microscopic ember safely catches, waiting patiently to be blown into a warm, life-saving flame. Extracting essential calories from wild, heavily husked grasses requires an immense investment of physical labor, and the continuous rhythmic abrasion of solid stone. Gatherers harvest bundles of wild einkorn wheat and tough barley carefully, parching the tightly bound seed heads over a low fire to gently dry the tough, inedible outer chaff. To process the grain, an artisan sits before a massive, elongated block of rough, vesicular basalt, heavily chosen for its deeply pitted, naturally abrasive surface. Handfuls of the roasted seeds are sprinkled carefully across the center of this heavy, stationary lower stone. Gripping a smaller, perfectly smooth handstone, the worker presses their upper body weight forward, heavily pushing the stone away and then dragging it slowly back. This deeply exhausting, repetitive, and mesmerizing grinding motion violently shears the tough husks away from the soft, starchy kernels inside. Slowly, hour after hour, the seeds are crushed and pulverized into a coarse, dense, pale yellow flour, cascading softly off the edge of the stone to provide essential winter carbohydrates. Weaving a highly breathable, completely waterproof rain hat relies upon intricate preparation and careful tensioning of a tree's most delicate layers. During the heavy spring rains, gatherers locate a mature western red cedar, carefully peeling away the rough outer bark to expose the soft, pale, highly fibrous inner cambium layer. Long strips of this incredibly flexible, aromatic inner bark are gently pulled from the trunk, ensuring the living tree is never completely harmed. Back at the sheltered hearth, these green, damp ribbons are meticulously split into incredibly fine, uniform threads using the sharp edge of a polished clam shell. The artisan begins the weaving process at the absolute top of the crown, utilizing a tight, continuously overlapping twining technique that inherently repels heavy moisture. As the flexible hat slowly takes form, the natural plant waxes within the cedar. Fibers are activated by the friction of the weaver's hands. The finished, beautifully textured cone effortlessly sheds the heaviest downpours, keeping the wearer profoundly dry, warm, and constantly protected. The creation of tiny, deeply symbolic shell beads demands an absolute, unwavering physical focus and the masterful manipulation of microscopic stone tools. An artisan selects a handful of fragile, beautifully curved marine shells, carried hundreds of miles inland through long, quiet networks of ancestral trade. To string these delicate objects, a hole must be pierced directly through the thickest, most calcified ridge of the shell without shattering the brittle structure. The maker carefully naps a tiny, incredibly slender drill bit, known as a microlith, from a flawless core of translucent obsidian, ensuring the razor-sharp point is barely larger than a grain of coarse sand. This fragile stone tip is permanently bound to a thin, perfectly straight wooden spindle with a drop of warm pine pitch. Resting the shell securely on a soft leather pad, the artisan spins the wooden shaft with rapid, gentle, and perfectly balanced friction. Slowly, the microscopic glass point silently grinds away the hard calcium, yielding a flawless, perfectly circular eyelet for the ancient thread. Engineering a passive, highly sensitive deadfall trap relies on an absolute mastery of mechanical leverage, precarious balance, and the exact physical weight of heavy stone. A trapper searches the forest floor for a massive, heavy slab of flat limestone, capable of instantly securing small winter game. To hold this heavy weight suspended in the air, the artisan carefully carves 3 small interconnected pieces of strong, dry hickory wood. The true genius lies in the creation of the delicate figure 4 trigger mechanism. Using a sharp flint knife, the trapper meticulously notches the wooden sticks, creating deep, interlocking squared grooves that perfectly catch and hold one another under immense downward pressure. The heavy rock is carefully lifted and rested entirely upon the tip of the upright, vertical post. The horizontal bait stick is wedged delicately into the notches, holding the immense crushing weight of the stone by a mere fraction of a millimeter of overlapping wood. The absolute slightest downward pressure will instantly collapse the delicate architecture, safely dropping the stone. Producing a deep, permanent black pigment for artistic expression requires the careful, oxygen-deprived thermal destruction of dense animal bone. An artisan begins by gathering the heavy, discarded leg bones of a consumed, grazing mammal, smashing them with a granite hammerstone to completely extract all the fatty, lingering marrow. These clean, hollow bone fragments are packed tightly into a deep, thick-walled clay crucible, completely sealed at the top with a heavy layer of wet, packed mud to prevent any oxygen from entering. The sealed vessel is carefully buried directly in the center of the roaring communal hearth, allowed to bake violently for several continuous hours. Because the bones cannot catch fire or turn to white ash without oxygen, the intense heat causes them to deeply carbonize, turning into brittle, heavily charred lumps of pure organic carbon. Once the earth cools, the completely blackened fragments are unearthed and placed onto a flat, granite pallet. Using a smooth river stone, the artist rhythmically grinds the calcined bone into a remarkably fine, impossibly dark powder, stitching a heavy, deeply insulated winter sleeping bag capable of withstanding absolute, sub-zero Arctic temperatures requires the highly specialized utilization of unique, hollow-core fur. A tailor carefully selects several massive, heavily tanned hides from the autumn caribou, specifically harvested right before the freezing winter when their deep coats are at their absolute thickest. The individual hairs of the caribou are biologically structured like microscopic, sealed tubes, physically trapping tiny pockets of warm, dead air directly against the frozen skin. The artisan lays the heavy hides completely flat, carefully trimming the jagged edges with a sharply pressure-flaked obsidian blade. To construct the bag, they place 2 massive hides together with the fur, facing directly inward, ensuring the sleeper will be entirely enveloped in the soft, heat-trapping fibers. Using a pointed bone awl, they punch tiny, evenly spaced holes through incredibly thick leather. The edges are meticulously bound together using long, wet strands of twisted back sinew, naturally shrinking as they dry to create an impenetrable wind-proof cocoon of absolute warmth.